Good evening. I'm Eric Pryor. Welcome to PAFA. For those of you joining us this evening in person, we hope you enjoyed the John Roden exhibition. For those on screen and those in the audience, please come to PAFA and visit our exhibition, Rising Sun, Artists in an Uncertain America, organized in partnership with the African American Museum in Philadelphia before it closes on December 31st. Tonight, we're thrilled to celebrate a partnership between two organizations, the African American Museum of Philadelphia, Crystal Bridges Museum, Fisk University, and PAFA. So you know I'm live, and that wasn't two. In our partnership, it was four, so thank you. The Anne Sallee Greenwood Discovery Series is a program highlighting and celebrating new perspectives in American art and culture. This series was made possible thanks to the generosity of Mary Ann and Reed Greenwald in honor of their daughter, Anne. Anne is an artist and an educator who received her MFA from PAFA in 2019 through our low residency MFA program. Mary Ann and Reed were inspired to foster this collaboration between the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art so that curators could share with the public how their discoveries, expertise, and interests had the potential to create new audiences for art and further scholarship in the field. I'm pleased that this program is presented in person at PAFA as well as simulcast around the country. To that end, I send a very warm welcome to Reed and Ann watching along with our friends and partners at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. We're thrilled to welcome our colleagues from Fisk University and Crystal Bridges Museum, who share equally in the stewardship and care of the Alfred Stieglitz Collection gifted to Fisk by the artist Georgia O'Keeffe, with works traveling between the two institutions every 2 years. Please welcome Dr. Anna Marley, our Chief Curatorial Affairs, and Kenneth R. Woodcock, Curator of Historical American Art, who will introduce Jamal Sheets and Jean Paget.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, all of you out there in the electronic land and here in Philadelphia. I'm thrilled to welcome Jen and Jamal to Philadelphia. I have been a fan of their scholarship and generosity of spirit for a long time, and I can't wait for this conversation. So I'm just going to quickly introduce them both, and then we will sit down and have a conversation about the partnership and collaboration. So Jamal Sheets serves as the Associate Provost of Art and Culture and Director of Fisk University Galleries. So like me, he has more than one title. So I know how that is. He's curated over 20 exhibitions, expanded partnerships, and designed innovative programs to foster access and engagement with the collections. He is committed to training the next generations of leaders through the development of the Fisk Museum Leadership Initiative. Sheets is a trustee of the Frisk Art Museum and serves on the board of TriStar Arts, HBCU Alliance of Museum and Galleries, and chairman of the Maddox Fund. He received an MFA from Tufts University and a BS in art from Fisk University, and is a proud graduate of the Leadership Nashville and also the Center for Curatorial Leadership, which I am also a graduate of. Jen Paget is the Wingate Curator of Craft at Crystal Bridges. In addition to advancing craft across the museum's collection, she specializes in modern art from the 1900s to 1950s. Paget has organized multiple reinstallations of the museum's modern art galleries and numerous exhibitions, including Seeing One Another, New Views on the Alfred Stieglitz Collection, currently on view. With Jamal Sheets, she is co-leading the publication project on the Alfred Stieglitz Collection, co-owned by Fisk University and Crystal Bridges. Paget received her MA and PhD in art history and archaeology from Washington University in St. Louis. And now, please welcome Jamal and Jen to the stage. This technology is amazing. I can see the slides and you can see the slides. So, hi.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to Philadelphia.
No, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the introduction. Such a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I visited Fisk many years ago when I was doing research on Henry Ossawa Tanner and saw your beautiful Three Marys, and then it traveled to Philadelphia. That was before you were there. And Jen, we've spent time together at Crystal Bridges, so it's an honor to have you both here at PAFA in the John Roden Auditorium. So let me start out by asking, some people in this audience might have heard of Alfred Stieglitz, but what is the Alfred Stieglitz Collection? Maybe I'll start with you, Jamal.
Yeah, I mean, it is truly one of, I just want to say, America's great collections. It includes fantastic examples of American and European modernists, as well as some African objects that we're really excited about. I can't help but look at the slideshow behind us, but it includes artists, and in front of us, it includes artists like George O'Keeffe, who actually donated the collection to Fisk, Charles Demuth, Florian Stettheimer, also Picasso, Renoir, Cézanne, and many others.
Yes, this collection of 101 works is one that is both defining in terms of this broad area of American art because of the importance of Stieglitz as someone who is a photographer, a gallery owner, a publisher of an important magazine related to photography, and somebody who is really at the cutting edge of the art that was being made in that moment. So by artists both in Europe and then really focusing in the US, artists that were pushing the boundaries. And when he passed away in 1946, he left a collection with hundreds of objects that then O'Keeffe had a task before her as his wife and executor of the will to divide up. So part of the collection went to Fisk University, and that's the Alfred Stieglitz Collection that we'll talk about in this lecture, but I'll also just make mention of the other Alfred Stieglitz collections that exist, including one that is just up the road at the Pennsylvania Museum of Art. So O'Keeffe, with this massive collection to divide, chooses institutions like the Pennsylvania Museum of Art.
Philadelphia Museum.
Oh, sorry, excuse me, that's right.
That's okay. People, Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, yes. Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Of course, and I should know better, having once been a fellow at the PMA as well. But Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, the Art Institute of Chicago, these really important institutions. And as Jamal said, the kind of highlights of this circle around Stieglitz.
I just want to add a little bit to that and just say that out of all the places where we were at the time, the only academic institution that had any part of the collection as well. So
that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So
and in the South,
Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Met.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say the Art Institute of Chicago?
Exactly.
And Fisk University.
Mm-hmm.
Also the National Gallery of Art in DC, and then also she gave a large number of photographs and other materials to the Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. And I know that the National Gallery has done a lot of work with the photography, and you have the photography and paintings in the collection?
Yeah, I would say the bulk of it is really paintings. We have about 12 or more photographs from Stieglitz.
Yeah, I think it's 18 or 19.
18 or 19, okay.
And the interesting thing is that the photographs in the collection are all photographs by Stieglitz. Yeah. And there were photographs by a wide range of other photographers that Stieglitz had known. So one of the interesting things that we're doing some work on is looking at what distinguishes this part of the collection compared to others. So for example, the gift that was made to the Art Institute of Chicago has photography by a wide range of different photographers. So not just Stieglitz's work, but really within this collection that's co-owned by Fisk and Crystal Bridges, it's all photographs by Stieglitz. And even in other object selections, you can see the way that when O'Keeffe was putting together this group, she was really foregrounding Stieglitz as a character. And that portrait of him by the artist Florine Stettheimer that's on the screen now is this great, charming portrait that she painted as a gift for him. He didn't sit for it or pose for it. She wrote him a letter and said, I'm painting you a portrait, and using the kind of color tones really inspired by his photography. So in this collection, thinking about how Stieglitz as a character is really foregrounded.
And I want to ask, is it just American modernism?
No, not at all.
Okay.
So also there's examples of Picasso, Renoir, and Cézanne and others. I think in a lot of ways Stieglitz is noted as introducing Americans to these artists. I think of the Armory show. And so it's just wonderful examples of that in the collection as well.
And that's been used at the university in coursework?
Oh, and everything that we do. So I'm actually laughing on the inside when you showed the image of Florine Stettheimer. And I'm literally laughing inside. Because when students come into the gallery, they always bring a different perspective. And there was a reference to Harry Potter in that last Stettheimer photograph, so I was laughing on the inside. Yeah, but it's when you think about Fisk and as an academic institution, it's a teaching collection.
Yeah.
And so we use it as a resource. I think O'Keeffe said at one point, she hopes it inspires a new way of thinking and seeing the world. And so we use this as kind of a gateway into that, and also into the broader aspects of our collection. So it's used in the art department. It's also used in the English department. Chemistry, philosophy, and every academic part of the institution, we use it.
Well, that's fascinating. And I remember when I visited Fisk, I was struck by so many similarities to the college where I went, Vassar College. I think they were founded around the same time. Can you tell us a little bit more about the founding of Fisk?
Absolutely.
Creation of it?
Yeah. So Fisk was founded in 1866, just 6 months after the end of the Civil War.
1866.
1866, yeah.
Okay.
We're getting ready to come up on our anniversary. I'm not going to do the math, but it was January 9th. And it was found in an area that is not its current location. It was actually found in the Gulch for those that had been to Nashville recently. And it moved to where the campus is now in 1873 after the Jubilee Singers had gone on tour to build Jubilee Hall, which was the first brick building for the study for people of African descent to study free slaves.
So that's the image that we're seeing.
No, the image you're seeing now was the gallery. And that photograph is circa 1950-ish. That's the Carl Van Vechten Art Gallery. And that's the building that I get to call home every day. It was built in 1888. I literally call it the house that Du Bois built because it was a gift from the class of 1888. We get these questions all the time. Why did this collection come to Fisk, or how did it come to Fisk? And Fisk has been a collecting institution since the 1870s.
Wow.
So yes, the Stieglitz Collection is 101 works, but we have another 4,000 works in our collection. So.
Well, and if you could go, I feel bad that we kind of skipped over the African art. Do you want to go back to that? Because, we were talking a little bit about the American modernism, which we associate with Stieglitz and O'Keeffe, and then the European modernism. And then now there's this collection of African art. How does that fit in, and how did that come in to this collection?
Yeah, there are 5 objects of African art that are included as part of the Stieglitz collection, and that was the majority of African objects that Stieglitz owned at the time that he died. So O'Keeffe, when dividing up the collection, decided to give this largest amount of those holdings to Fisk. She didn't give any to the Met or PMA or Art Institute of Chicago. And these objects, while small in number, are really significant in the history of American modern art. So works that were on view in Stieglitz's galleries, in exhibitions that are the ones that are continually referenced. And we'll see later in the presentation, an exhibition that the Crystal Bridges presentation right now really foregrounds around the sculpture that's in the center, this reliquary figure, and ways to dive into that history. So even though it's a small amount of objects, it really has had a huge and lasting impact in the history of modern art.
It's the most used object on campus.
The
coat
reliquary
It is.
one.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And is it hard when it leaves campus?
No. The memory always remains. And then even going back to the question earlier, when you walk to the art department, you'll see reference to this. And the same thing with the Dakota mask. I mean, you know, it is all, and you'll see in that part of the presentation, it is always, or the Kola reliquary, it is always ever present on the campus. So, yeah.
So I think I'm making you jump back and forth, but this core small group of African objects is a complement to other works in your collection that I believe were the focus of a recent exhibition that you've been working on. And I may have jumped all over the place, but
it's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic exhibition, African Modernism in America. It was co-curated with me, Perrin Lathrop, who's fantastic, and the Coupadar, former assistant curator. It's now in Germany. Yeah, and so just to give a snapshot of that, much of that would come from the Harmon Foundation. And today we have one of the largest collections of African modernists in the country. So we're really excited about that collection, but also the continued scholarship that's come out of it with the exhibition. So.
Also, one of the elements that I so appreciated is how you involve students in every step of the project. So even the preparation of objects and conservation in advance.
Yeah, that's in everything that we do. The only thing I didn't say in the beginning is that we say the arts are a critical component of the fabric of the institution. It's in everything that we do. And so, yeah, in this particular image, we see one student that's proofing the catalog. So every image that's in the publication that's from our collection, it was proofed by a student. And then also we had the opportunity that was supported through Bank of America, where students had the ability to work with Ian McClure and Kathy Hebb to conserve objects in the collection.
And I've heard about the conservation program, and particularly been really amazed by the work that's been.
It's exciting. And it's something that, you know, we partner with the HBCU Alliance, and the HBCU Alliance partners with the University of Delaware and their wonderful colleague, Julie McGee, who is here. And Joyce Stoner said that she could not make it, but she was going to be tuning in.
Joyce.
I'm going to say hello.
Sending you love, Joyce. Yep. So tell us a little bit more about, we saw those great Aaron Douglas murals. So it looks like done in the 30s. So this would have been before Georgia O'Keeffe gave the gift.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about the 1860s.
Yep.
And how about the early 20s?
We would have objects or things come in, well, you know, even thinking about the Harmon Foundation, I think our first Harmon Foundation exhibition would happen in 1927.
And maybe not everybody knows what the Harmon Foundation is.
Yeah. Okay, so so William Harmon was a wealthy real estate developer who actually grew up with Buffalo Soldiers and was inspired by them and said, we were going to do something one day. And so and I won't go into super detail about the Harmon Foundation, but he set up this foundation. It was run by Evelyn Brown and Mary Beatty Brady, and they would give awards to African-American scholars, artists. It's a long list of, I was thinking about Charles S. Johnson just now, who received one award. And they would exhibit these works, but also collect them and then take them to what we would call today non-traditional spaces. So those works would be exhibited at YMCAs. They would also come to institutions like Fisk. When they dissolved in 1967, and I'm giving really cursory notes, if you want me to dig deeper, I can. But when they dissolved in 1967, they broke up the collection. And we were one of the recipients of that. Now, why that happened is twofold. Driscoll played a really big part in that. He would succeed Douglas, but also Douglas played a really big part in that. And so when we think about Fisk and our collecting history, yes, he came in 1930 to paint the murals. He would come back in 37 and start teaching once a semester, I believe, and then officially found the art department in 1944. Douglas doesn't get enough credit for he gets credit for being an amazing educator, but he doesn't get the credit of being an incredible arts administrator. Because he would be, if you look in the archive, you will see some letters and correspondence from like the Brooklyn Museum or even the New York Historical Society, where he's bringing exhibitions to Fisk. So, yeah.
So you talked about Aaron Douglas, and then you mentioned David Driscoll too.
Yep.
Then he's part of the legacy.
So that comes a little bit later, 1966, 67. So that comes post-gift. The Stieglitz Collection had been cemented at that point, had been there for nearly 20 years.
So I think this might be a good point to ask, how and why did this collection, the Alfred Stieglitz Collection, come to the university? Because again, to go back, those names you mentioned, you know, the PMA, the Met, the Art Institute of Chicago, and Fisk. What was it that made this happen?
You know, that's something that we're actively researching right now. There hasn't been truly a smoking gun, but there's things that we can kind of reference and think about. We were talking about it earlier before we actually sat in here. Charles S. Johnson and his friendship with Carl Van Vechten and that whole New York art scene, that played kind of an instrumental part in that. Janet talked about O'Keeffe being an educator. That played an important part of that. There's a lot of people right now really rethinking and thinking about O'Keeffe's philanthropic gifts. One thing when we talk about partnership that I've been super excited about is the internships or the opportunities that students have had. I want to pass it to Jen.
Yeah, that idea that even from the very moment that O'Keeffe decided to place the collection at Fisk, that really integral nature of student involvement was at the top of her mind. And just to describe a little bit more about how that connection formed and also why there's maybe not just one single reason. A lot of the that she gave the collection, that kind of main point of connection was through the critic and photographer and writer Carl Van Vechten, who is really deeply involved with the Harlem Renaissance, had a wide network of friends in literature, art, sociology, and his friendship with Charles S. Johnson, who was the first African-American president at Fisk, was the inspiration for him to send a note to O'Keeffe and say, as you're thinking about this, what about Fisk University? And Van Vechten was really savvy about the idea of building up institutions through strategic placement of gifts. And he often gifted things to libraries or museums or institutions, sometimes naming it after someone else. So actually at Fisk, there's the Florian Stettheimer Memorial Library that he gifted a holding of books related to American art to the institution. And then he also made gifts to Fisk special collections and archives. So a collection that's related to popular music, which he called the George Gershwin collection. So he was somebody that was really thinking about this kind of legacy building while he was alive. And he was very close with Johnson, who was president. And Johnson was this phenomenal leader. He was charismatic. He was somebody that could connect with people and help them to see why being a stakeholder, why having this level of commitment and buy-in to the institution is something that was really exciting. So Carl Van Vechten makes the connection, but when O'Keeffe and Johnson meet and talk about it, it really sets this spark. And one of the things that we've come across in some of the research that we've been doing at the Fisk Special Collections and also in materials that we have at Crystal Bridges relates to some things that O'Keeffe had written through letters and correspondence. And in one place, she also references the gift to Fisk as relating to Carl Van Vechten, but then also to what is now the Spring Arts Festival. So there was a festival that had been established around art and music that had been also in advance of this gift, that she was paying attention to what was going on campus and this very lively presence of art and music and thinking about how this gift could fit in. So returning to Jamal's point about that idea of student involvement, these photographs that show O'Keeffe on campus in 1949 doing what every curator who works on a show is excited about doing, those final preparations to put the work on view, and at the core of it involving students So having them hands-on, whether it's what looks like a reframing project, or in the case of a student that we know her name, Edith Pollen, in this photograph, touching up the mount for that coda reliquary that you saw in a previous image. So that idea that she's on campus, she's engaged with students, even during what was a very grueling schedule to install the whole collection, to make changes to the building lighting and have all those elements in place, that she was really interested in how this could drive that kind of engagement.
And, you know, this partnership between a New York artist and a Southern institution, I'm wondering, I'm thinking about my CCL classmate Turi in Tougaloo, because I know that there was that partnership too there. Did that happen before this, or do you think that George O'Keeffe knew about the Tougaloo, or did that happen after? Was this partnership an influence on that?
That's a great question. I think that partnership happened later.
Okay.
I think that maybe that partnership happened in the 60s.
In the 60s,
I believe.
yeah.
I think
yeah.
that
So this was an inspiration for that.
It possibly. It definitely served as a model.
Sorry, that was a surprise question.
Yeah, it was. Well, I had to think about it for a second. I was like, their museum wasn't founded in, like, I think about why their museum was founded. I think it was like 1962, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I think Julie's nodding, so we're gonna say, yeah.
Well, that point though about geography, I think is really important, because when you look at the other institutions and think about the geographic stretch, that she's looking at DC, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and at this point she was also transitioning to be living full-time in New Mexico. So actually the time when she comes for this 1949 installation, in actually this article that is written by Bill Woolsey, who is writing for the Nashville Tennessean at the time, describes O'Keeffe's arrival on campus, where they've just come from this kind of epic road trip, O'Keeffe with her associate Doris Bree, and there's this great description and that idea of being out in New Mexico, coming to this place in the South. And the South was not a place that O'Keeffe knew very well, but she had spent time in Virginia previously actually teaching. So she might have been thinking about that kind of geographic range, and especially because she's considering these questions about legacy and how does this really cutting edge new work that she thinks is really important to future consideration, having a kind of geographic spread could be something that's beneficial.
The only thing I would add to that is that if you think about placing the skiff in Nashville in 1949, the rural South, that this was the only kind of cultural institution that was present. Like the closest museums would have been in Memphis or Knoxville or Atlanta or Georgia. So it was kind of it transformed the community at that point.
So there wasn't a Frist or
There wasn't a Frist, no.
Okay.
I mean, I think by 1950, there were a few failed institutions that didn't, really take forth, that now that collection is now at what's known as Cheekwood, but that would come much later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I wanna move on and bring us to how the two of you came together, and how did the partnership between Crystal Bridges and Fisk develop and evolve?
Yeah, and here it might be helpful to say a few words about Crystal Bridges for anyone who maybe hasn't had the opportunity to visit. That Crystal Bridges is a museum of American art in Bentonville, Arkansas, and our mission is to present the breadth and diversity of American art in a setting that amplifies this intersection between art, architecture, and nature, and really about welcoming all. So the vision of our founder, Alice Walton, was creating this place where people could come and have meaningful connection to works of art, to think about American history, in a setting that is in this beautiful ravine. So you can see the architecture of the building really integrated within nature. And then also outdoor sculpture, trails around the 120 acres surrounding the museum, all of this space where people can come to be inspired, to rest, to recharge, and to see really outstanding works of American art. So our collection ranges from historic American work to very contemporary art, and the Stieglitz Collection is a really key element of that. So the museum opened in 2011, and the co-ownership between Crystal Bridges and Fisk was finalized in 2012. So some people that are familiar, or maybe art historians in the field, people who are paying attention to museum and art news in the period before 2012, might only know the collection because of what was a long legal battle.
And we in Philadelphia are very familiar with legal battles around art. So maybe Jamal, you could, we could have a whole session.
We could.
But maybe just a little primer on
Yeah, I mean,
stakes there.
it was a 7-year legal battle. It was painful for a lot of people in a lot of ways. At least the perception of pain was there. It really wasn't. The reason why I pause is because what this partnership allowed us to do was that the collection would go to Crystal Bridges for 2 years and then come back to Fisk. But Pete, the broader public thought we sold the collection. And there was so much, what's what I'm looking for, anger and mistrust that came out of that. And so, but it was also a really big opportunity for us, because then we could bring in other exhibitions, and so more objects from our collection. So the exciting thing that we have today is that the conversation is different. When people call or they come by, they're excited about seeing something new. And then when the collection is back, they're excited about seeing the collection once again. So it's a wonderful time now. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that way in which the co-ownership that really has so much more around it, that is not just about a sharing of custody, that it's not just about here are these objects that travel between these two, and something that has just continued to grow over the past now 11 years of that co-ownership, are thinking about the ways in which the work that we do can help amplify exactly what it is that O'Keeffe was hoping to achieve. So how these works can reach audiences where at Crystal Bridges, we're looking this year at around 700,000 people visiting the museum. So able to reach, which it takes a whole team supporting, this museum, and especially at the moment that we are working on an expansion and reinstallation project. So a museum of huge ambition and reach, but then opportunities to work together around scholarship, to think about the connections between archival holdings that we have that were gifted by Doris Bree to Crystal Bridges, that are a really beautiful complement to the deep archival holdings at Fisk. So everything from thinking about how we're reaching larger audiences, creating this more dynamic kind of interchange, and hopefully, just to O'Keeffe's point, encouraging those new ways of seeing and thinking.
Yeah, and so I think that's the meat of what I was really excited about talking to you about. Like, what has emerged out of this partnership that you could not have predicted?
Oh, that's a great question. It's been such a wonderful relationship working together. And so with that, it's on one side, it's a community. Me and Jen, we have a call every week, just to kind of check in and talk about things that are happening and things that we're thinking about and planning and preparing for with the Stieglitz Collection. But also, when you think about the campus more broadly, it provided opportunities for us to expand some of the things that we were thinking about or actually doing. So we talked about integrating the galleries in all academic disciplines. Is that Jennifer DiMartino up there?
It is.
Yeah. I think that was the first time that the collection came back, or the second, I'm not sure. Actually, that's the second or third time. But the first time that Jennifer came down, she worked with a student. And the student did the condition reports. Jennifer DiMartino and I think it was Alex McWilliams at the time did the condition reports before that. So it's always ways for students to learn something new. It's birthed into other things as well, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. So so that's Fisk. How about Fisk coming to Crystal Bridges?
Yeah, those moments of travel between the two institutions have been so meaningful because it provides the opportunities for students to learn more about different areas of museum work and hear from people that work across different departments at Crystal Bridges. So having opportunities like the Fisk University Galleries Museum Leadership Program, which had different modules, spending time in different locations, able to come for a week at Crystal Bridges and hear from members of our prep team who install the artworks to members of curatorial and exhibitions, having those kind of opportunities for training to learn more about the field. And then for us to also hear from students. What are the things that students are excited about, interested in? What are the ways in which we could imagine also the field growing is really so meaningful. And on that student level is the kind of core, like that's the heart of the possibilities there, but then also the ways that it can drive new thinking around the collection. And at Crystal Bridges, one of the programs that we have is our Tyson Think Tank, which is one component of the larger Tyson Fellows program, which is a residential fellowship. So bringing scholars to Crystal Bridges, and I'm pleased that we have a former Tyson scholar in the audience tonight who's now doing a fellowship here at PAFA. So it's amazing the network of connections that you have when you have the opportunity to host scholars who are working on really exciting and engaging projects. And then thinking about those ways in which you continue to bump into each other or work on projects together as you go. So the think tank was the idea of creating a short-term fellowship. Most of the Tyson scholars are in residence for a semester or an academic year, but having a moment to instead have this focused, intensive work together around a certain topic. So in August of 2022, we had a think tank that was around the Stieglitz Collection and had 3 scholars that were working on projects related to the collection, choosing an individual object to really do a deep dive on, being in residence at Crystal Bridges for most of the 3 weeks, but then also taking a trip to Fisk and visiting the galleries there, which felt just like this full circle, this kind of connection between having these deep and involved conversations. And both Jamal and also their director of the library came at the beginning. So Delisa Harris, who's also been a wonderful collaborator at Crystal Bridges at the start. And then at the end, going to Fisk, spending time in the galleries, looking at the Douglas murals together, seeing other works from the collection, and then being in special collections and talking together was just really this kind of deep, intensive work that will have so many kind of impacts and outputs. So people might see a, say, a finished exhibition or a catalog, but the things that often we see behind the scenes, and why I'm especially pleased that we have the opportunity to talk about it here, is that process behind it. So it's about going to places, it's about having those connections, which is really wonderful.
I think that's an amazing story about bringing people together and being in very specific places. For us at PAFA, working with our colleagues at AMP, we took a field trip one day to Independence Hall here in Philadelphia, and the curator at Independence Hall talked to us about George Washington's mahogany chair and that history. And so there was our 2 teams working on the show together, working with someone else in a very site-specific place. And the conversations, you know, like we still think really positively about how that place and that time and doing that deep work together created something wonderful and new.
That's really beautiful. And it makes so much sense for the Stieglitz collection because these objects physically travel between the 2 institutions. So the whole of those 101 objects, those will travel physically every 2 years. And then how having people able to travel it as well and have those experiences, I think is really beautiful.
Yeah. And the exciting part, we get to look through the slides, and as we're going through it, I'm seeing students, I'm like, oh, well, that person is now their first year at the University of Delaware studying conservation at Winchester. Not in this slide, but in a previous slide. Going back to the partnership and really thinking about, I guess, a lot of what we spend time doing, and I see Cody Hartley up there now, who's one of my favorite people. And when we started the Fisk Museum Leadership Program, Rod and Cody were the first two people I called.
Rod Bigelow.
Rod Bigelow, who is the director at Crystal Bridges, and Cody Hartley,
Who's the director?
who's the director at
Georgia O'Keeffe.
Yep, O'Keeffe Museum. And Cody, is a fantastic individual. And one thing that he said is that we're always rethinking about O'Keeffe's philanthropic gifts, and that there's just not a lot of information out there. At least at the time it wasn't. And so to have 3 institutions kind of rethinking her and her life right now was such a special moment. And then to have students participate in the process. So what I talked about earlier and what Jen alluded to, there's an internship that students in special collections were researching and cataloging, researching information in Stieglitz Collection, looking for what's missing, that we're compiling that will then go into the publication. The other part, and there's so many slides that we're going through. The other part is that we're continuing to learn so much about the objects themselves. Many of those objects have been conserved. So there's one slide that comes up a little bit later, like the flying backbone you see here, and also the radiator building. We learned so much by taking students there. I don't know, from our perspective, it may be different at Crystal Bridges. When we look at what has been described in the not the radiator building, in the flying backbone, it's very different than what Dale Cronkite, who's the chief conservator there at the O'Keeffe Museum.
Yeah, and this was another one, this really special moment. Back to your question, Anna, about what this collaboration has made possible. This moment when earlier this year in May, we had a group that was Fisk staff, so Jamal and then also Christine, who works as the collection manager and registrar, who also has a background in conservation, and then myself and Mikkel Geller, who is our registrar of collections at Crystal Bridges, traveled with 3 Fisk students to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum and also her homes and studios in Abiquiu and Ghost Ranch, to go with the primary purpose of seeing these 2 works, so Flying Backbone and Radiator Building, which were both gifts that were part of the Stieglitz collection. But I'll put just a little asterisk, because these 2 paintings were not works that were owned by Stieglitz at the time that he died. These were O'Keeffe's paintings that she then added to the collection to ensure that her work was also represented in what she saw as this really key collection of modern art. So we worked really closely with Dale Cronkite on this very intensive imaging and conservation process. And it was mostly about this research, looking really deeply into the kind of imaging of the paintings that will also help for the long term in tracking the rate of change and keeping an eye. There wasn't something that was, say, an urgent conservation need that we might have flagged for something that had needed to happen before it traveled, but it was really about having that deep dive into these paintings, working with Dale, who is an absolute expert, the amazing knowledge that he has about O'Keeffe and her working practices, and then to be able to bring students into that space, and students that had trained with Christine at Fisk, learning about how to do condition reports, where you look really closely at objects and note every single thing that you can about the way the surface of the painting looks, to then see these paintings, which are important paintings in O'Keeffe's career, especially Radiator Building, to have that combination of expertise, collection-based learning, student experience was really special. And the O'Keeffe Museum, they were such generous hosts. The ways in which we were able to have special access to see her homes, it was a really phenomenal experience. And it was something that wouldn't have come about if it wasn't for this collaboration. And then also because of the larger project that we're working on, that there's this publication project, and then we're also imagining expanded online content related to the presentation. So creating video and other materials related to this project that we received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to support. So having those kind of opportunities and being in that place together was just an absolute, personal highlight, but then also professionally and for our 3 institutions, really wonderful.
Wow. Well, we're doing pretty okay on time, actually. So I think I have two more questions that I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to ask, and then we'll open it up to the audience, both online and here in the room, for questions. So what I want to know is, how's the collection used at Fisk now? We talked a little bit about that, but also how's it used at Crystal Bridges?
So we teach on these slides here. I see one program in the corner, on the top corner, which is called Big Babies in the Gallery. So we literally work with people from 0 to north of 80 with the collection. And so that's one way that it's used. Yeah. We run a lot of programs around it.
Babies in the Gallery. I think
Yeah,
we might
it's called Big. Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun. I mean, the
Yeah.
campus is littered with strollers when we do that. So it's quite nice. The administrators always look like, "What's going on?" It's big. Don't worry about it. And also pictured here, there's a few other images where our students, again, we're so much student centered in everything that we do, and our students, give tours. They do so much with the collection as well.
How many students do you have at?
The campus population's just under 1,000.
Okay.
And we have on the roster, generally on a given year, maybe 40 gallery ambassadors, but we have about 20 plus that are really committed. But that ebbs and flows just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you were talking about the number of visitors, you see 700,000. I was like, oh my God. We see close to pre-COVID, we were seeing 10,000 visitors a year. So for an institution our size and a space that size, we felt like that was pretty remarkable.
I think that one of the wonderful things at Fisk is that it's most likely when you first enter the galleries, come in and are welcomed, it's a gallery ambassador who is welcoming you, getting your information, and then telling you about the galleries in the collection. And I've often been surprised because I'll come to Fisk and I'll have a great gallery ambassador who tells me all about this. And Jamal says, oh, it's their first week. That they so quickly pick up on such a sense of enthusiasm about the collection, about the place, and professionalism, that it has been really wonderful to meet students that way. And if you visit Fisk, it's very likely that when you come in, sitting there to the right is the person who's going to say hello as one of those ambassadors. I can talk a little about the ways in which we've been thinking about the collection at Crystal Bridges, and especially through the lens of a focus exhibition that's on view right now. So for anyone in Bentonville, this is open until January 1st. So you have until the end of the year to go and see this exhibition, which is all about having new perspectives on works in the collection. And in this case, we've combined works from the Stieglitz Collection with works from across other holdings of Crystal Bridges. So you might see, say, a great Alice Neal portrait of someone with works from the Stieglitz Collection on that similar theme. So thinking about those thematic groupings, and the title of the exhibition, Seeing One Another, is all about that way in which looking at artworks can help you to see how the artist was seeing someone else, or these connections across time. But in this exhibition, we were really thinking about, how do we present the African objects? In the context of Crystal Bridges, a museum of American art, it's often surprising and lacks the context of, what are these objects doing here? How do we think about these or talk about these in a way that can give more depth than just saying, Alfred Stieglitz was very interested in these objects and he and other white modern artists were inspired by them? How do you really do justice to the very complex and deep histories of individual works, was the kind of motivating question. So in this exhibition, the way that the different themes are grouped is about themes that connect to the meaning of those African objects. The theme of the exhibition is not, these are African objects. It's really about, how do we see a ballet mask that was a portrait of an individual in a section that's all other portraits? So helping to see new connections between works. And then also doing a deep dive into individual objects. And this is the place where it feels the most like our research process is thrown up on the wall. So often we're very focused on getting those word counts down to the 75 words per label.
75 words per label?
We are at 75 now, Anna. So we present in English and Spanish for all text in the galleries. So it does mean that we want to keep it compact to also keep keep within ADA accessibility. So we'll go to 90, I'll say, if there's a special reason. So
Okay, all right.
The question, though, of how do you give different ways to interact with the works, or how do you have those moments where people can have that more content-rich kind of dive, was the motivation for what's this interpretation around the reliquary figure. So on the wall, there's a combination of images, text, all relating to the history of this object and everything that we know about it from its origins to the kind of present usage. So Jamal had mentioned that it's one that feels like it has a presence on campus even when it's not there. And one of the things that stood out from looking at archival material, doing deep dives into, say, publications, was how often this figure was represented, whether it was on the cover of a exhibition catalog around African art, or something as dry as extended services in museum science training. You know, that's maybe a little bit more of a like practical text, but the idea that even there, that sculpture has a presence. And so seeing how it inspired artists like David Driscoll, who is on campus, or say James Miles, who has work that is on view in Jubilee Hall, in which he had taken that figure as inspiration for this ornate carved frame. So thinking about these new ways of engaging visitors in this practice that connects them with the history of the object, with the archival holdings of the institutions, and dealing with this complex story was really key.
So I think it's almost 7 o'clock. I've got one last question, which is kind of the big picture question, and then we'll open it up to our audiences. But what are the advantages and really the challenges of this kind of collection sharing? How's that expanded your practice as curators, which is what this lecture series is all about, but how has it challenged you as well?
I want to come back to the challenges. I have to think really heavily on that one. But the opportunity, and I alluded to it earlier, that 7-year legal battle or the entering of this partnership really opened the door for a lot. You know, it gives us the opportunity to expand the use of the Calvin Victor Art Gallery. So now we're able to bring in more exhibitions. So that's one exciting part about the partnership. The other side, I lost my train of thought just that quick.
That's okay.
It's just one of those things.
Yeah. It did get you enough coffee.
I know. I think that may be part of it. Yeah, so there's so many different ways that the partnership has functioned, and we've been able to learn more about the collection, expand the knowledge, and rethink it. So that's one of the wonderful things about it. The challenges, that's the hard one. That's the hard question. I really can't think of any off the top of my head of what is a challenge outside of, I don't have a challenge right now.
So when people in Nashville got so upset, you know, that it was going away,
Well, we had to shift the narrative. I mean, we definitely had to. I mean, that was a challenge. But
that was a challenge.
Oh yeah, that was a heavy lift to shift that narrative. But it became really easy
once it started doing it. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think especially to see the exhibitions that you've done at the galleries in recent years, and just looking at how dynamic that program is. That right now there's this show that has connections to an exhibition that's at the Fisk around collage, around Black artists working in collage. And so that opportunity to have exhibitions that are complementary to other things that are happening at different institutions. I'm remembering you did that also for a William Edmondson show that Greenwood had hosted. So there's opportunities.
We're serial partners, let me say that. I mean, we partner with the Fisk quite often. And Cheekwood was such a wonderful opportunity to do so. Yeah.
Well, and maybe you'll be able to partner with Art Bridges and PAFA
so we
to take a John Roden show.
Now that would be incredible. I have many questions about that, but we were early. Many questions. I mean, we've already, I would love for that to happen, but we were one of the early partners with Art Bridges as well.
Yeah.
And we also have lent objects to Art Bridges, and we've borrowed works for Art Bridges. Going back and thinking about the exhibitions, when I lost my train of thought, I was going to say one of the wonderful things about the partnership, or at least this agreement, was that we could now integrate other objects in the collection to show a broader history of American art history.
Right.
And so that's been really amazing. But then to work with so many amazing colleagues like Jen or Jennifer DiMartino or Mindy or, and I cannot think of her name. She's going to be so mad at me, but I know she's watching right now.
Awesome.
Margie Conrads.
Oh, Margie. Yeah.
who has been so instrumental in thinking about some of the things that we're just starting to do right now. So yeah.
Well, I know Lori's giving me the look, so I think she has some questions. Lori, do you have some online questions, or do you want to open it up to people here?
I want to just let our online audience know that it's time to type in your questions and answers. And I was trying to figure out a way to see it on the computer I was using, and I couldn't. But we see you, and we want you to definitely type in your questions from the audience. In the meantime, I'd like to hand over and open it up to questions in our audience here while we wait for the folks online. Okay? I'm bringing the microphone to you.
I'd like to ask do you have the description of all the 100 objects on the website?
We do. So you can see all 101 objects on the Crystal Bridges regular collections page. We have a special kind of package or object grouping. So if you go to the Crystal Bridges website and look under art collection, you'll see that there's a grouping that's all of the works that are from the Stieglitz collection. So they're there. There's high quality photography of all of them, and everything that is often very delightful to look through because there might be things that surprise you. Of course.
Is there another question in the live audience?
Hello, and thank you so much for that amazing presentation. I was blown away also, like Jamal, when you said 700,000 annual visitors. I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. And in Bentonville, I'm just curious the population there.
Oh, is less than 700,000, I'll say.
Curious.
So when the museum opened, I think the hope was that maybe 200,000 people would come, or maybe 100,000. It was much more modest, but there has been such a response to the museum, and it has continually been growing, so that our audience is large and made up both of people who come to Bentonville as visitors from other places and people who live within the region. So it's about 50-50 split of the total visitors.
Wow.
Because it is a place that the total population, which Northwest Arkansas is a region where a lot of people are moving, it's really growing, it's a very lively and active place. But I think it was somewhere just a little north of 600,000 last time I heard. So having that really dedicated following and people who will come from the community and have a cup of coffee or visit the trails or do things that have a variety of experiences, right. And then people coming from other sites as well.
I'm going to ask one more thing, and then I promise I'll let other people have an opportunity. I'm also just curious the impact on the ecosystem in the area. Is it spawned other galleries or arts activities that are in the Bentonville area? And I'm also curious, has it been an impact, Jamal, on what you guys have at Fisk in terms of this such a large audience seeing the collection connected with you guys? Have you seen some uptick or connection there?
Yeah. Do you want to answer the first part, or?
Yeah, I'll answer, because this seems like also a perfect excuse to invite you out for a visit, because seeing it all in person is even more fun than just hearing the description, because it really has been the kind of catalyst for so much in terms of art and culture growth in the region. So Crystal Bridges opening in 2011, and then seeing the development over the past 12 years now, there's such a growth in terms of institutions. Even for our institution, we opened a contemporary satellite space, the Momentary, in 2020. So another space where there's everything from big festival concerts to experimental theater or performance art. And so having another site as well has been a huge addition, but so much growth. And if you come and see public art, murals in the downtown, there really is that sense of art being integrated within the community. And then also our ecosystem is exactly the word that we use to describe the organizations around Alice Walton's philanthropic vision that include Crystal Bridges and the Momentary, Art Bridges, which was mentioned, which is a foundation that supports sharing American art across the country, the Whole Health Institute, and then also the Alice Walton School of Medicine. So also having a medical school built just a stone's throw from the museum, and really having that kind of growth around all of these different facets in which art is really integral and woven into them it's a very special and unique place to be. So I'm going to say the invitation is open, and I hope we have a chance to show you in person soon.
Yeah, and so to get at the second part of the question, I had a visitor coin it the O'Keefe Triangle. So we'll see visitors that will come from go to Santa Fe, the O'Keefe Museum, to Fisk, and then go to Crystal Bridges. And that happens quite often. So yeah, definitely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Just wanted to remind folks online, if you can type in your questions in the Q&A, that would be great. Are there any more questions in the audience?
Julie, do you have a question?
So you had mentioned in the very beginning that you're putting together a new program around the original collection and trying to better understand why. Do you have any idea when or how far along or when that might become public and available for the rest of us?
Yes, I do have an idea. As one of the main authors and the co-editor of the publication with Jamal, we're working on this publication that we plan to have available in 2025 that will have both thematic essays, so scholars that are writing deep dives into certain elements around the collection, but then also the individual objects published with the short object entries around them, which would then be a kind of resource and guide for anybody who's interested in the collection. And the things that we're working on are just really exciting in terms of sharing more about this story and publishing things that maybe have never been published before. I'll see if I can go back to a couple of photos that are in the Doris Bree collection at Crystal Bridges, because as a researcher, when you find things that people haven't seen and that you've never seen somewhere else, those are those moments that are just like a kind of lightning strike where you feel like this is really special. And so things like these two images that were taken by two photographers, Tom and Jean Hollyman, visiting Fisk on assignment from Holiday magazine, which was a popular kind of luxury travel magazine, and they were writing an article about Tennessee. And neither of these photos make it into the final article. Also, this article has it has one small image of the galleries, but thinking about these images and how they might open this window into understanding what was it like for students to be seeing this collection in the 1950s and thinking about the larger social, historic, political kind of frame around that, but then also that experience of students just looking really closely in depth. And then those moments when you're doing research and you're in the archives and you see a letter between the president at the time and the director of the gallery saying, these people are coming on assignment. We need to make sure we have some students in the galleries to photograph, that you can put together all those kind of dots. And so we hope that this publication, which will be a great introduction, but by no means covers all of this rich history, will just inspire even more people to realize how much is there and how impactful this collection and its history can be. So 2025 is the short answer to your question. So.
But we have some other milestones coming up, which I think this year, or 2024, we'll be celebrating the 75th anniversary of the gift. So that's a really big deal. So we're super excited about that.
We do have questions from the online audience. How do your students or classes or adults respond to some of the abstract work in the Stieglitz collection, such as the early Harley painting, number 3, or the Severini that was just on screen. I guess it was just on screen.
Yeah. Both of those are wonderful examples. I think students respond more to the Gino Severini more than the Hartley, even though it's interesting to think about what is the most, and every year it's different, the most copied, when the exhibition's on view, what is the most copied painting is actually Arthur Dove Moon, which I find really interesting. But Severini is one that they spent a lot of time really working to unpack. In the last two exhibitions that we had, it was paired closely with the ball mask. And so really linking the European modernist influence from looking at those African objects. That's a really good entry point to begin to talk about the abstraction of the collection.
Yeah, the Severini is one that is a big favorite. And one of the things that we didn't talk about, but there was a slide on, was Fisk students that were virtual interns. So at Fisk during the academic year, but working closely with me around learning how to do object research. And they each chose one work from the collection. And one student, Brooklyn Farmer, chose the Severini. And so part of that was also writing an object label. So learning about those things, and also for me, seeing what things students are curious about or what they want to talk about in relation to works and what stands out has been really wonderful working with them over the years.
Julie, did you have a question?
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And it turns out it's actually a follow-up to what you were talking about, Jen. And I was at Crystal Bridges in the spring, and I encourage anyone to go there and to Fisk. The labels for the objects that are in the current installation that has the Stieglitz Collection, written by a variety of students and curators, they're actually signed, they're authored, which I love, thank you. I'm curious as to whether the interaction between Fisk and the Crystal Bridges Museum encourages you to think directly about changes within the museum as a whole, and might that be something that you would continue with other object labels throughout the museum?
I am so glad that you mentioned that, because I forgot to say that in reference to that current exhibition, Seeing One Another, and that you picked up on, yes, that the labels are signed, and many of them by Fisk students, and then also by other summer interns that we had, some of them from Morehouse. We had students writing great labels on, say, the Charles White drawing, which also, because of the nature of some of the works on paper, things rotated in that space. So some things changed over time. But that opportunity to work with students, and also how that can set a model for other things, was very much top of mind, because the ability to have students engage with the process of label writing and learn those skills that, if they have any interest in going into the museum field, will serve them greatly. But in any other kind of writing they do will also help serve them, because it's a very difficult format to write in that short word count and get your point across. And so having that editorial back and forth between myself, the interpretation specialists, the students, and making sure that their voice really stands out, and also thinking about institutional voice, was something that I feel is a seed that is planted with this exhibition that we hope to continue. Because really that ability to tell a greater range of stories, to add greater texture, to emphasize multiple voices, and also get visitors thinking about who actually does write these wall labels, is one of the things that can open this kind of pathway to visitors. Because at Crystal Bridges, we have a great enthusiastic public. Sometimes they don't know very much about the art historical side, or sometimes they just want to have this experience within this space, and the ability to think through different kinds of wall labels, what it is that they're experiencing, or what are the different ways that we could shake up a little bit what is the standard museum practice, is definitely something that we're thinking about now, and especially as we look forward to reinstalling the whole of the museum collections and expanding the permanent collection gallery space, which is a project that'll be completed in 2026.
So I think Lori's giving me the message. I want to thank the Greenwoods for making this lecture possible, for making it possible for Jen and Jamal to come be here with us at PAFA. I want to encourage everyone to visit Crystal Bridges, to visit Fisk, and to also come here to PAFA to see our amazing John Roden exhibition, Rising Sun, and all the amazing work that will be inspired by the collaborations that you are doing. So please join me in giving a hand to Jen and Jamal.